Welcome, Earthlings. Today we're going to go over the body awareness perfect posture introduction. I'm really excited to talk to you about this, and so let's get started. Okay, so there are going to be several parts. I'll mention more at the very end. This is just going to be introduction to the main sort of principles. Alright, so what is the purpose or goal of this video? So my goal in this video, and by the way, I might be looking down at my notes a little bit, so pardon, that's why I'm looking away. So my goal in this video is to help raise your awareness dramatically about your posture throughout everything that you do, and give you guys a good overview of many points to keep in mind so that it can help improve the quality of your life dramatically as well. So I want to stress that this is raising awareness about your posture, but the reason I care so much about posture and I want to really make this video for you guys is that I think it can transform your lives in ways you may have never even imagined. Alright, so quick stupid medical disclaimer, but I'm not a medical professional, so if you may want to consult a doctor, do anything I say at your own risk. If you have serious issues, probably go see a physical therapist or a doctor. If you're sort of fairly healthy, maybe follow along, but just use your common sense. All right. Importance. So, hi. Posture is something you need to address right now to improve your life across the board. So it affects breathing. So you can't take a breath with bad posture. So for example, if I'm crunched up in a ball, I literally cannot expand my lungs fully, no matter how hard I try. Whereas if I'm more open, then my lungs can expand fully. There's a higher susceptibility to injuries, particularly if you're performing exercises or even if you're just through normal everyday life. Aches and pains, muscle joint issues, performance, academically as well as athletically. So there's less fatigue, better concentration, more explosiveness, fewer energy leaks if you have good posture, more strength, etc. So for example, if I'm standing in a weird way, I can't jump very powerfully off this weird posture, but if I'm loaded nice, I can jump much more powerfully. Just as an example. Mental well-being, so linked to pain and pleasure. And this is a really big one I'm going to try to stress, and I find this maybe isn't talked about enough. I've heard it talked about, but not enough. Confidence and aesthetics. So let's compare two people. Let's say you have a slouched person who's pretty muscular and like lean and in shape. So let's say you have a great physique, but now you're slouched. Versus a person that may be a little more out of shape, maybe they're a little chubby, whatever, but they have great posture, right? So the person with sort of the better physique that's carrying themselves like this will be seen as sort of, not as aesthetically even appealing as the person that may not be physically as in shape, but they carry themselves with good posture. That's not the main reason, that's just a bonus. Alright, many people don't notice how bad their posture is, or don't think it's too bad because they can't notice the slow deterioration until it's too late and they're 70 years old with a hunch like the Notre Dame hunchback. I see this all too often in the city, especially in my neighborhood where there's a lot of middle-aged and elderly people. It's very sad. And more people are doing what I call the ironic hipster slouch, among others, where it's just you. Anyway, I'm going to talk about all sorts of weird posture positions, but before, I guess these days it's seen as sort of cool to have bad posture occasionally, unless you're in the athletic community. So I want to, it's not, they're going to have long-term issues. So I want to encourage you guys that this is something you want to address now. Don't feel like, well, it's not a huge problem yet, I'll just get around to it. It's more important than many people realize for everything. Like I said, breathing, athletic performance, mental happiness, energy, academic performance. Now, you probably already knew this, that being sad or happy can change your body position. So emotions can affect your physical state. So for example, if I'm smiling, my body's gonna, my body's perking up, it's sort of opening, right? And if I'm really sad, I might droop my shoulders and head. So that's sort of obvious to people. What's less obvious is that there's a lot of scientific research that's showing that it works the other way as well. So did you know that body postures cause emotions? For example, in one study they had people put a pencil in their mouth, and which allowed, like, I won't get into the science. If you want, I'll post links. The point is this: if you make even a fake smile, then that can actually improve your mood. So if you even make a fake frown, it can actually make you feel worse. So think about it in terms of posture. So even if you feel great, but now like your posture is not so great, it might actually start to make you feel a bit worse. So sitting hunched can literally make you feel more depressed and less confident. Whereas walking with your chest out and tall, you might not like start out feeling very confident, but if you're walking out, you know, in a good posture, then it might give you a direct boost to your confidence. So can you, for example, here's a thought experiment. Can you think of a really confident, let's say famous person or friend that you have off the top of your head who has terrible posture? There's a reason why you're having trouble thinking of this person, because those things don't go together. Now maybe there's one exception, but usually no. The huge thing is this mental side. Clearly posture is going to affect physical things that, you know, shouldn't come as a surprise to you guys, but the psychological aspect, I think it's a mental health issue. So let me give you guys an example. So I have a very good friend, old friend from school. He's very tall. He's like at least half a foot taller than I am. He's like, I don't know, like 6'4" or something. So he was a really big kid, but he didn't want to be intimidating growing up. And I've known like many such tall people. You know, this might resonate. I'm sure you've seen tall kids or people in your neighborhood that they kind of like want to make themselves smaller into a ball so they don't intimidate people. And you know, he would make himself smaller into a ball with stooped shoulders, and that actually noticeably affected his self-esteem and confidence in social situations. Or, you know, many nerdy kids or kids with social anxiety, they're either afraid to, like, you know, it might have started out as a sort of a social mechanism, and then it's turned into a physical issue later. So for example, they could be afraid to draw more attention to themselves because, you know, they already feel invisible and hope that by maybe being physically, like taking up physically less space, they'll be even more invisible, and maybe they'll get bullied less or have fewer awkward social interactions. They're not going to be sort of like put in the spotlight. Or that they just feel that you know, they want to be modest because that's a value they have, and they're afraid that if they puff out their chest like the pretentious jock kids or something, you know, that they don't like the jock kids, so they don't want to, you know, be cocky and pretentious like that. So for others, it's the opposite. They feel they like, if you're sort of like a really athletic jock sort of type, you know, you might feel the need to flaunt your body and seem powerful or beautiful. You know, maybe there are self-esteem issues and you feel like you have to project this image. For still others, you know, I see this a lot in New York City, like folks on the subway, you just might be tired or depressed. You know, you had a long day of work, a long day of school, and your posture, you just simply like give out. Now, that's something we can actually work on fairly well, because here's the reasoning. If you're tired or depressed, it feels like it's just too much work and energy to have this high energy, big posture. And for a split second, it's actually easier to, you know, it takes up less energy to just let everything drop. But here's the issue. The problem with this theory is that you have to expend energy. So to have a better effect, you actually want to expend a little bit of energy to gain energy. Because with better posture, what happens is you get more oxygen from better deep breathing. So it actually lessens the fatigue and depression. So while it takes more energy to maybe have this nice posture initially, now you're getting more a lot more oxygen and things are flowing much better in your body, and over long periods of time it's actually going to lessen your fatigue and depression and actually boost your mood. So in other words, you can't just do the next best thing, you have to figure out what's best over the long term. So one of the worst offenders, like I discussed certain situations, like if you're tall or social issues, but one of the worst things and like unavoidable things might be just a job that pretty much necessitates bad posture, like being a taxi driver, truck driver, public transportation driver, or professions like a clerical worker or other professions where it almost forces you to have poor posture over long periods of time. And it applies to almost everyone because we're just so frequently at a computer or sitting at a desk job. Or even in school, you're sitting at a desk, right? That can't be good for you for 8 hours. Now, there are two options. You can employ tricks and improvements to minimize the damage and or switch jobs. Switching jobs is not an option for everybody, so we're going to focus more on what you can do right now. So to come back to the high level, I want to integrate this video into the health series theme of everything being connected. So you guys will hopefully see this come up over and over. So sure, you might have postural issues that nag you, and perhaps this video will even, or these next few videos, will help address some of those isolated issues. But what I would really love to change is people's lives. So like I said, you may think of those, like maybe you have a shoulder issue or like your neck. You may think of these as isolated nagging issues, but I'm here to at least propose the idea to you, for you to consider, that all the major issues in your life, your career, your social life, your mental health issues, your passions, your major fears, might all be transformed as well by addressing your posture, because everything is interconnected, and maybe an indirect approach will help you attack those big challenges in life that you're not sure how to attack. So don't be surprised if improving your posture improves your self-confidence, your social life, your stress levels, just to name a few. All right, so let's go to the background, physics, how it works. So here's a common thing, which is if I have poor posture, it's very frequent that some muscles are going to be too tight and shorten, while others are going to be too weak and lengthen. So for example, and these are longer term imbalances. There's other, and we'll show them in a second. So for example, let's say, I'll discuss this in the next video in depth, but if you have internally rotated shoulders, for example, they're going inside this way, right? So that means this part is too tight and the back part is too weak or loose. So you're basically going to want to stretch this part and strengthen that part. So that's just an idea. So, but there's also other factors such as injuries or even genetic differences in limb length, though that's a lot rarer. But there's also immediate fixes resulting from just changing habits and awareness. So for example, here's like a really great example. If my head, if you guys can see it this way, it's stacked over my body. Now if I jut it out forward, your head weighs a considerable amount. I mean, it's not like 1 pound. I forget off the top of my head. It might be 10 pounds, whatever. But if I jut it out forward, then the torque that's created from it being further out, it can magnify it to be like a factor of 2 or 3, or a lot heavier than it actually is. So, and that places a lot more strain on the rest of the muscles. So let me give you guys an example. So even if I'm an like untrained athlete, if I go to the gym and I put on like a few hundred pounds on like a squat rack, I'm not going to squat, but let's say I'm standing straight and I just want to load the bar, I might be able to support, a few hundred pounds on my skeleton. I mean, I can squat, let's say 250 pounds or whatever, so I might be able to support like 400 just not doing anything. But if I bend my body as soon as I'm out of alignment, then I can no longer support that ridiculous amount of weight. And if you're a trained athlete, there's people putting up world records like 1,000 pounds or even more. But, you know, if with a little bit of training or a moderate amount of training, you can support tremendous amounts of weight if your body is aligned properly. As soon as it's out of alignment, that torque makes it significantly harder. So let me give you guys an example. So here's a 6-pound dumbbell. Right now, if I'm holding this right here, it's pretty easy. I could probably hold this for a minute, no problem. You know, even for, I'd say for 5 minutes if I tuck it like right here. But now imagine if I'm gonna outstretch my hand. So now suddenly my shoulder, let's say I might be able to do this for a minute, but you know, it's gonna start to burn. So that's the point. You don't wanna be holding your body in these disadvantageous positions. Now, and also, you know, if I am trying to lift thousands of pounds, as soon as I go out of alignment, that's an ER visit right there. So let me give you another example. So here's a hammer. Now, a hammer is meant to be, usually, you're gonna use it this way, right? Because here's the heavy part, and now you have all this momentum, but imagine if you're using a hammer backwards, right? So you have the heavy part, and now you're hitting stuff with the light part. That's not a good use of the hammer for most purposes. So it's just not as effective, and you're likely to injure yourself as well. So the same goes with posture. I just want to really make it very clear. To get the most out of your body, you need proper alignment. And you know, some people that have poor posture, you guys might think that like, oh, it's just like a 2% difference. It's not a big deal. Like, you know, there's much bigger fish to fry. It's a big deal. But you wouldn't know it until you fix it. Like once you fix it, you'll be like, why didn't I do this earlier? So, you know, and just like, imagine carrying your head like this the entire day. If it's right here, everything's aligned, or just like a building, right? You guys, the Leaning Tower of Pisa, any building that's like tilted, that's not a great thing. If it's standing vertically, it can support itself much better and much longer. Now, let's go to the themes. So I want to stress themes and principles. Why? So that you guys can interrelate things in your life and do more things on your own. So I want you guys to be independent ultimately, you know, or at least know where you can get help. My goal is not to make you guys so dependent on me for every little thing in every video, but rather to just share things, you know, that I've learned, that things I enjoy sharing with you guys. You know, you guys should be learning all the time, but you know, you shouldn't feel like, oh, I don't know what to do on my own. I have to consult with Ilya. So I'm here as a resource, but I don't want to make you guys dependent on me. You know, I'm just sharing things that have worked well for me. So let's go over the main thing. So themes. Let's say I give you guys some pointers like this is a bad posture, this is a good posture in the next few videos, and you try it out on your own, and you're like, okay, my shoulders are like this, is that good? Right? So how do you know if you're doing it right? My first cue, this is not, you know, super scientific, but it's a good starting point, which is it should feel good. Good posture feels good. If it doesn't feel good, chances are something's wrong. And here's the other thing, it continues to feel good over long periods of time. So for example, if you're sitting with your shoulders hunched, like you had you know, like people on the train or subway, they had a long day's work, they're tired, the shoulders droop, you'll feel it's harder to take a big breath. Try as hard as you might, like I mentioned earlier. Now, I'll mention a little more about this later. So, also, good performance. So, good posture is gonna adhere to the general laws of physics for good force production and reducing torque. So as a result, you should be able to perform your activity well, whether it's just sitting, standing, your sport, whatever. That said, so back to the point I just kind of dropped, if you're gonna slouch at the end of the day's work or school, whatever, that could actually feel good. So you're like, wait, slouching feels good. So Ilya, you're not giving me good advice. But it's only going to feel good for a short amount of time, not a long amount of time. So, you know, I like slouching too on occasion, if you know, but then after a few minutes, like it basically, slouching is just a way to relax from having a different posture. So, and I'll talk about this, about the need to have variety at the very end. This is, you know, when you're slouching, you're cutting off your blood supply, and you're creating muscle tension as well as weakness. So after 5 minutes, it actually won't feel that great. And long term, you're going to get mysterious aches and pains and discomfort in your body. And like I said, it can actually creep in and change your whole mood. So another one, constant awareness and habits. Those are key. You want to become aware of your posture throughout the day. You can't fix it if you're unaware of it, or if you're only occasionally aware of it. It needs to start bothering you constantly. If it doesn't bother you, you're not going to fix it. Then you'll fix it much faster. Now, another point, dynamic and static. So when people think about posture, including myself in the past, we typically think of just like standing or sitting, like not doing anything, just how you are still. That's your static. But I want to emphasize that posture matters all the time in everything that you do. So for dynamic activities like walking, running, lifting, and I'll talk about this more in future videos, but it's not just standing. Next, root cause. So I believe posture is at the root of many, many other problems, combined with the lack of just general movement. I dare say, and this is, kind of, don't take this as scientific dogma on my part. This is just more like speculation, but educated, just bits and pieces. So take this for what it's worth. But I dare say it may even cause such issues as, like for men, prostate issues, incontinence, erectile dysfunction, a load of issues, lower back pain, whatever, just tons of stuff. Just by sitting too much, I mean, for men, a lot of these issues are for men and women. So just by sitting too much on your butts, preventing good circulation and weakening certain muscles. Improving posture can magnify other interventions like 1,000-fold. A little postural improvement goes a long way. I want to say that again. So let's say you have some slight postural imbalance. If you improve that even a little bit, it goes a long way. All right. So now let's talk about sort of the last theme, which will be that when we talk about postural issues, they'll come in many different flavors. So you'll have just habits, like maybe you have no serious like muscular issues or imbalances. You just tend to have one thing and you can just quickly fix it by being aware of it. But then there's muscular imbalances, and then there's also injuries. That could be a much trickier one. So beyond just bad habits, here's the principle. So I'm going to focus on the muscle part. I don't know if you guys can see this down here, so I'll just read it. So we have stretch the tight, or assuming that's the root cause, so stretch the tight muscle and strengthen the loose antagonist. So let me give you guys an example. Again, in the internally rotated shoulders, this part inside here is tight, so you would stretch, do a load of stretches to stretch this stuff out, and for it to go here, this is also going to be weak. So you want to strengthen this to bring it back and stretch this to help bring it back as well. So you want to hit it from both those two dimensions, the stretching of the right muscle and then the strengthening of its opposite muscle, antagonist. All right, so, and I'll say more about this in the next video as well. Now for injuries and scar tissue, I'm not going to do the definitive treatment, but some good rules of thumb are you want to do very high volume of low intensity exercises to get the blood flow going, break up the scar tissue. So let's say if you have a shoulder problem, assuming this doesn't give you pain, you might do like hundreds of shoulder circles trying to go get as much range of motion as you can. You might do some swimming. But if it's hurting, there's sort of like a slight discomfort area, but then there's like a pain area. You don't want to go into the pain area. So it's very important to have very good blood flow and to do, like I said, very high volume if you have serious injuries. So like, let's say also if you have knee pain, right? So if you have knee pain, lower back pain, whatever. For knee pain, you don't want to do the heaviest loaded squat you can at the gym of like hundreds of pounds. You might want to do walking or sled dragging where you're doing, there's some intensity, but you're doing it for higher reps over long periods of time, getting that blood pumping, the nutrients. Now, and again, you don't want to re-injure yourself. And the idea of doing all this high volume stuff is a lot of times people have an injury. Now again, this is dependent, you know, all case dependent, so just use your common sense. But a lot of times people have an injury and they think the best thing to do is rest that injury. That'll actually, sometimes yes, or for some periods of time, but after, like when you feel ready, you actually want to do active recovery, so to get blood flowing, but not in an aggressive way where you're gonna, you know, re-injure yourself. So in the next video, and that's about all I have to say there. So again, I want to try to interconnect everything. In the next video, we're going to get down to the nitty-gritty and see examples of good and bad posture, and I'm going to try to go body part by body part during the relatively static activity of standing. And in subsequent videos, we'll go over sitting, walking, other athletic movements, as well as some final thoughts. All right, so hopefully that was a good introduction. You guys have a few themes, a few things to be aware of as we go through these things, and I'll see you guys in the next video.